So, you're fundraising, but standing in front of investors is giving you tons of anxiety. What if you say this right? What if you say this wrong? What will happen? How will they look at you? Listen up. Right now, I'm going to help you build a bulletproof pitch deck that will make you look and feel confident in front of your investor. Most people, when they start their pitch, they go with, "Hi, my name is blah blah blah, and my company is blah blah blah." Now, don't do that. You only have very little time, very small span of attention from the investor to listen to you. What you want to do in the first 20 seconds to 30 seconds is actually hook their attention. No one cares who you are. To them, it's khaliwali. Instead, try this. Start with a context. That means something like when or where. I'm talking about starting with a story. The best way to start a pitch to hook your audience is when you convert the problem your company is solving into a dramatic story that starts with a big problem that ends with a climax, and that one is the solution. There are some keywords that can help you start your pitch. Memorize that keyword, and once you start, it will take off with you automatically. These are things like when for a time context, or in, for example, in 1992, this plane crashed due to blah blah blah. When I was little, I lost something. This can be hard sometimes because a lot of us are doing like deep tech solutions or something that is a design luxury product or art. In those cases, if you're a deep tech solution, I don't care about what AI model or technology you're using to solve a problem. I care about the results. And I like this line that says, if you have a drill gun, we are marketing the hole, not the gun. We're marketing the hole it makes, which is the result. Most investors want to know how much money did it save the client, how much resources did it save the client, how much time. With design, art, or luxury solutions, you can always play on the happiness and emotion dramatic theme. How did your product make someone's daughter, mother, father so happy? How did it save someone from depression? After creating a very nice story and a very nice plot, we want to put the cherry on the top. We need to talk in numbers because that's the language where everyone who's sleeping will wake up, right? Now, I understand that not all of us are generating revenue, but there are other numbers that you can show. And let me go with priority revenue. How much did you make on this idea so far? I want to also make sure that it's not one or two person or companies. I want to know that this idea was validated across a larger spectrum. How many people paid that fee over the last year? How many paid you to generate that revenue so far? This indicates for me that you have a product market fit, that your problem that you chose is actually real and people are willing to pay you money for it. Second thing is, I want to know as an investor if the solution you created is good enough for people. This is indicated by retention figure. I created a solution for a real problem. Because the problem is real, people paid me for it. But if my solution is good, people will stay with me and they will pay me again. Investors want to know these numbers. Out of 100 people who came to you, for example, how many people stayed with you over the next year? Or how many people returned and repeated that transaction with you? This can be expressed in different models. If it's a subscription, how many months or years they stayed with you? If it's a direct sale, did they come back to you? Did they recommend you to other people? If you do not have revenue, this is already a big hit to your pitch. And this is something you need to realize and accept. However, something that compensates a bit to it, think of it as a pill of a Panadol, is the number of users you have. You need to show how many users are visiting your application or website. If it's an application, Was their app installed? How many? Was there signups? How many? How long are they staying on your app? Because there is a difference between someone who liked an ad so they installed the app but they didn't like it when they use it, and that's indicated by the time they spent on that mobile app, and people who actually download, they use it, they're using the functionalities, but they did not pay yet, because that shows a better positive indicator compared to people who just install and do not. Try to utilize these numbers, try to highlight it if you do not have revenue. Show that people are actually using your solution. That gives better hopes that at some point they're willing to pay. If you have a website and people are visiting that website to see your product or service, and they do not necessarily need to log in or subscribe or so on, try to show the bounce rate. Out of 100 people, how many continue on the website and how many close immediately. To know these figures, you will need some analytical tools like Google Analytics for websites and Firebase for applications. Let's get back to the scenario where you actually generated some revenue. There is a lot that you can double down on when you talk about that. Another thing an investor wants to know is, what's your cost of acquisition? How much money did it cost you to get this customer? And usually we're talking about marketing cost. How much did you spend on marketing to get a single customer to buy your product? This is very important for investors because now they're starting to understand how you're going to spend the money they are going to give you. From this point, they can measure so many things like the valuation of your company. Remember, this is something that can also be used even if you're not generating revenue. You can measure cost of acquisition per customer to do a specific action on your website or app. Like, what is the cost of acquisition to get someone to install your app? These numbers can still excite the investors a bit, even if you don't have revenue. If you're generating revenue, another thing that investors want to know is, what's your profit margins? Don't be very shy, because at the end of the day, if this investor joins you, he has to know these numbers. He's part of the business, he's your partner, he or she, because this tells them how scalable is this business. They can predict a break-even point if they know what's your profit margins. And that comes from experience, from previous investments they made. Here's one very common, I wouldn't say a mistake, but something that is not very interesting that people put, which is the market size. Now, I do understand this is something a lot of academies will teach to entrepreneurs, which is you have to put your market size, how big is your market. But realistically speaking, I wouldn't include that in my pitch at all. And the reason is, most investors, if they're really good, they already have enough experience to tell your product market is big enough for them or not. The market size number is a very vague number. And one of the biggest mistakes that people do is they would say, this market is $10 billion market. If I only get 1% of it, that's a red flag, right? Don't do that, because this only shows that you don't have a market penetration plan. What they want to know is, what's your plan to get that 1%? That is way more important. What's your marketing strategy? Are you an influencer yourself, for example? Or are you going with paid ad campaigns? Are you doing events? How good are you to get customers to your business? And people can be very creative here, because there are techniques in this area alone make an investor put money into you. Do you have a track record? For example, you started a business before, which exited or you closed it, but it had a database of customers. Now in your new startup, this new product is relevant to the same database, so you're going to use this as a hack for a quick market penetration. Are you going to do some very interesting partnership with another corporate or an enterprise because you work there and you have a very solid connection? So these are all ideas that investors want to hear about, how you plan to enter the market. They don't want to know what's the 1%. If you have done all of that right, by this point, investors should be sold in and should be planning to book the next meeting with you. Remember, it's very hard to close deals from the first pitch, but what you should aim at is to secure follow-up meetings for due diligence with them. But if you reach this point, we want to polish ourselves a bit. So what makes my team credible to execute this business? This is when we talk about ourselves, not at the beginning. We proved the point throughout this pitch, and now we want to say why we are the right people to do this work. This is when you talk about who you are, who your co-founders are, what credibilities do they have that are relevant to this business. And why I'm saying this, because most people put the entire resume of someone. We don't want to see the entire resume. We want to see what in the resume is relevant to this specific business, because people usually do career shifts. I want to know which part of this career, of their career, will help them with this startup. Finally, we reached the ask. How much are you asking for? Let's say you're going to ask for $100,000. It is very important to show how do you plan to spend this money. The investor wants to know that you have a plan that will take you from point A to point Z and it costs this much. So how do you divide it? It's nice to show like a pie chart. Like I'm putting 20% in marketing, 30% in hiring, 50% in production, and so on and so forth. If you are doing any breakthroughs, try to show at least a pending patent. These things do matter. Of course, patents are not as popular as before because everything can be copied in China. However, if it's a big breakthrough, try to have one. Otherwise, the best game you can play is the market acquisition game. If you have something that can be easily copied by anyone else, you need to prove why and how are you the quickest to take the largest market share of this business. Finally, this was my quick guide to pitching to investors. Let me know what you think in the comment sections below, and see you soon.